Hello and welcome to a fresh new episode of Mobility Conversations. And our guest today is Mr. Raunak Varma, Managing Director and Country Head for CNH Industrial, India and SAARC. Raunak, welcome to Mobility Outlook.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure having you with us today.
Pleasure's all mine.
So I'll start off with the basic question about the current situation of the industry. How is business for CNH Industrial in India?
So CNH Industrial, as you know, is present both on the agriculture and construction side. The construction segment is lagging a bit in terms of, but we expect that the investments made by the government will gain some traction, and we expect that market to improve. On the agricultural side, as you know, right off the pandemic, it's come back very strong. And last year we had probably the strongest year in 2021 with over 900,000 units.
Okay.
This year is not going to be far behind. I think the difference between last year and this year is essentially going to be the inventory building from the previous year that we came out of the pandemic was required, and that boosted the industry a bit. That inventory was already in the channel this year, so probably you won't have that inventory build.
Okay.
But broadly, all the fundamentals are still in place. The rainfall is still, progressing well. There's some parts that are affected, especially like UP, Bihar, some eastern parts, but hopefully that'll catch on. But overall, the rain distribution is pretty strong. Commodity prices are actually holding off pretty strong and countering the inflation in the equipment and input costs. So the farm income is still holding pretty strong. So we expect that this market, if it doesn't, there will be a decline from the previous year, but I think it'll be the second biggest market in the history of the tractor industry.
I see. What are those critical drivers that you think will actually drive business for the organizations in the coming years?
So look, we are the segments that we essentially play in are the agricultural commodity business or the equipment business, and then the construction equipment part, right? Both are influenced a lot by government policy.
Sure.
And we believe that the policies that the government are bringing out are quite favorable in terms of both these industries. But apart from that, I think the fundamentals of the agricultural industry, I think today the agricultural industry globally is pretty strong. In India particularly, I mean, this is the fourth year that we are having really good rains, so I think that's helping in terms of productivity. The harvest that we're seeing is growing each year. And at the same time, we are starting to see that commodity prices are also holding pretty strong.
Okay.
So much so that, the government has had to, you've heard about wheat,
Right.
where the government has pulled back from export. We may see the same thing that will happen on sugar, even though, we expect quite a good crop on sugar as well, and sugarcane and sugar production. So there is a good local consumption and domestic demand. And all of these bode pretty well. So the rural income for India should be pretty strong this year. And that is invested in mechanization, because that's a real requirement, right?
Right.
And that's what drives the tractor industry, because it's really tractorization. When you call mechanization, it's just tractorization. And labor is becoming scarce in rural India.
Right.
And so the farmers have no other option but to actually go out there and find other means, alternative means to actually go out there and harvest, plant, and do the activities that are required on the farm.
Okay.
So with the industrial side catching up and the investments that the government is doing and industrial activity catching up, more and more jobs are being available on the industrial, which are less laborious and also much better paying. So, and that has to be replaced by machines, and that's where we come in, and OEMs like us that come in and are able to provide affordable equipment to our consumers so that they can carry out the farms, the activity on the farms, and actually provide food on the table for you and I and the country.
Right. You mentioned affordability. From a product perspective, Raunak, which is the segment that is the highest contributor to your business? I understand it's a 30 to 40 horsepower segment within tractors.
So look, if I looked at the industry, the 40 to 50 horsepower segment contributes more than half the market. I think it's around
All right.
54%. But if you look at New Holland, which is our agricultural brand, more than 50% of our sales is 50 horsepower and above. So
All right.
it's sort of skewed on the higher horsepower. And that's driven by two things. One is our legacy is strong on the high horsepower for sure. But at the same time, as a group, our strategy is to grow profitably, right? And I think that's a quite profitable segment for us. But of course, now we want to, we've done a lot of work on value engineering and cost engineering. And I think the margins of our business are pretty strong and healthy. So what we want to do is now go to the next phase, which is the mass market of 40 to 50 horsepower. We've introduced new products there in the 45 horsepower, 41 horsepower, 47, and some variants on the 49 horsepower as well. So I think we're enriching the product portfolio here so that we can offer a full array of products to our end customers. We're also entering in the below 30 horsepower, which we never existed before. That's about 10% of the market, but New Holland and our brand was not present in this segment. We've just launched under the Blue Series, we've launched a compact tractor, 28 horsepower, and we will offer different variants there as well. So we want to be available in the full spectrum as long as we can grow it profitably.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, you said it's a very small segment, right? 10% overall industry. So what's been the driving force for New Holland to really get into that segment? And what's the kind of opportunities that you see there?
Yeah, I think look, we're really focused on our customer, and I don't think that we are being fair on the customer by not providing him an option of his favorite brand in the segments that he needed, right? So if our customer wanted a smaller horsepower tractor, which is a specialty tractor, we are not getting in the mass market of small tractors. It's a niche segment where you have what's called inter-row cultivation, or you had orchard applications. That's where we want to get into. It's much more of the higher end of the smaller segment.
Got it.
That's where we want to get into, but those are our customers that otherwise had to go to different brands and seek those products. So that's really what's driving us to enter in this segment and provide our consumers with the choice, a product of their choice and a brand of their choice, which is New Holland.
Okay. Yeah. So apart from tractors, Raunak, when you look at the entire farm equipment portfolio, where do you see the largest opportunities coming in? And if you can give us an idea about your performance in the industry.
Yeah. So for us, like I told you, if I looked at the entire tractor market, it's 4%. Our market share is 4%. But if I looked at 50 and above, it's in double digits, right? So we play a much bigger part there. Then if you looked at the next is within the 40 to 50 horsepower range. 30 to 40 is a lot more commoditized, so we are like 1% player there.
Okay.
And so really, like I said, our growth, while we do want to grow, we want to grow profitably. That's the mantra of the group. And so what the area that we want to start to participate is in the 40 to 50 horsepower.
Okay.
I think that's where the largest market is. There is a large part of our consumer base that is part of this market and is looking for the quality products that New Holland actually provides. Okay. So that's where we've enriched our portfolio. That's where we expect our next wave of growth to come from.
Okay.
And then, like I said, the specialty segment on this compact is an area that we are focusing on as well.
Okay, wonderful. If you look at in the current context, what's the kind of contribution that CNH India is making to CNH Global?
So look, CNH Global, and I'll talk about 2021, is roughly about 20 billion in terms of global revenues. And this I'm talking about after it's spun off from the on-highway. So at the beginning of this year, we had a spin-off where the Iveco business, which is the commercial vehicles, powertrain business, was spun off from the off-highway, which is agriculture and construction equipment. So this is about $20 billion as of last year. Hopefully it's growing this year. India closed just below about 900 million, if I looked at between domestic and exports for the group this year. So in that regard, you can make out the participation of it. But remember that India has by far the largest volume of tractors within the group as a country.
Sure.
And it also is a manufacturing and a value base for the country, right? So in terms of production of value tractors for construction equipment as well as harvesting equipment. Not only that, for components that we supply to other plants within the CNHI group, and as well as we do sourcing from suppliers, and we are creating that supply base out of here.
Okay.
And now you're sitting in this R&D center where
Right.
it is another opportunity for us that we actually go out there and we're able to provide R&D services, digital engineering service, software engineering services out of here. So strategically, I think there's a revenue size, and then there is a strategic component of what the country has to offer to the group, and I think that's gaining in importance every day.
Sure. I mean, it's pretty clear in terms of the investments that are being made
Yeah.
in the Indian operations. How do you look at this ITC really contributing to CNH globally? Like the kind of, you can just give us an idea about the kind of work that is happening here.
So this is a one-year-old initiative, and I think as when we first drew up the strategic business plan of what India could look like, for the group, a part of that was to build the competency center here in two ways that it could actually benefit the global organization by providing competencies at a very competitive cost. So therefore, you could stretch your R&D dollars to do a lot more.
Right.
But at the same time, would benefit the India market and our consumers, because we could become much faster and quicker to market because of the competencies that we would build out of here, right? So that was the two-pronged approach and strategy that we had. Within that year and where we are today, we have about 300 people that are part of this. Mainly in the area that we have seen, we've all of the R&D segments of mechanical. So you look at electricals, hydraulics, mechanical engineering that we do. But then on top, all of the newer technology that we are looking at in terms of what the electronics that go on board, so the hardware. But at the same time, also software engineering centers is started up here. I think we are hiring we have about 40 to 50 people that are just core software engineering resources that we have out of here. And we want to grow that as fast as we can. I mean, talent is a challenge these days, but I think if you want to build scale, India is probably the place to do it. It's very difficult to get it together anywhere else.
Right. How are you looking at the production capacities in the country, considering the growth potential that this market offers?
Yeah, so I think our production capacity is going to increase about 50% from where it was last year. So we were about 50,000 capacity. We are now at 60,000 already this year. And by next year, we should be close to about 75,000 because we see opportunities both on the domestic market, but also on the export. As I was telling you, the equipment that is produced out of India makes some of the best margins for the group, right? So that tells you that the value that India has to offer in terms of manufacturing capability, industrial footprint, is if not the best, one of the best in the global footprint, industrial footprint that we have, right? Sure. But not only is it an issue of cost, it's also quality. So I think our Noida plant has produced one of the highest quality standards within the agricultural segment in the group. The Pithampur plant produces some of the most competitive costs per hour that we see anywhere else in the CNHI footprint. So that's why the equipment that actually comes out of here is not only really good in terms of cost, but also great in terms of quality. Yeah.
All right. Right.
So that's been recognized in the group.
Okay. You spoke about challenges as far as manpower is concerned, but there are other industry challenges, supply side challenges, or labor, raw materials. How is it for you, and how are you coping with it?
So look, there are challenges in every industry. Sure. I think the way we are coping with it, so let's come to supply challenges first, and then you talked about supply and labor. So I'll address them differently. We faced supply challenges when we had the last boom back in 2018, right? Okay. And I was dependent on China for castings, and raw material, and actually at that point I was airlifting castings out of China, and which was probably the worst thing that you could ever do in terms of airlifting. Right then we took a decision that we want to localize everything. So it was a cost issue for sure. So clearly we do localize everything that has to be sold in India, because otherwise you cannot be competitive. But even for lower cost, let's say from destinations like China, and you can see what the situation with China is today, and thankfully we did that. Most of our supply chains are all local, and so we were able to manage that far better than our other plants, simply because they were dependent on global supply chains.
Sure.
And we're not, thankfully, dependent on global supply chains, and our relationship and our working relationship with our suppliers is really great, and the guys are doing a fantastic job of being able to do this. So our plants in India were perhaps the only plants that were producing at or above plans, even when the world was facing all these challenges that we had. So yes, I mean, it's the relationship with the suppliers and managing our local supply chains that allowed us to do that. The second is labor. Well, on all our plants, I think we have great working relationship with our blue collar and the labor that we have here. So we are pretty stable in terms of our workforce in the plants. The corporate sees an attrition, and I think attrition is lower than the rest, what we see, and we track that pretty closely. And we are creating an environment that people actually want to come to work. We've been rated at a great place to work for 3 years in a row with improved scores. And what we want to be is an employer of choice for all segments of employees. And as we build, or move from being a pure manufacturing concern to becoming one that is hiring people out of financial services and people out of software, and we've got to cater to a wide spectrum of employees, and we want to meet the expectation of all our employees that are part of our group in India.
Okay. So, you mentioned sourcing. What's the level of sourcing that's happening out of India for CNH globally currently? So
globally, we are not doing as well. I think we are probably sourcing close to, I would say, 150, 200 million. But what we want to do is to grow that like 3x of a year. So as a first step. So there are initiatives of the best cost country sourcing that was part of the strategic plan. And we are working on that with some of our key suppliers. And what we want to do is build that to over $500 million out of here. And so I think that's going to gain a lot of traction. It already is. And we should start to see that ramp up pretty quickly. That added with the domestic volume that we have should put us in a pretty good place with our suppliers in terms of priority and economies of scale that we can get out of them.
So when you look at the overall structure and the kind of business operations that you have, you spoke about sourcing. There are of course products, new segments that you're getting into. So Raunak, when you look at the mid to, let's say, the short to mid term, right? What is the kind of expectations that you have for CNH India from a business perspective?
Look, I think from a business perspective, first let's talk about India, and I think we are pretty bullish on India as a market, right? By virtue of two things, there's a lot of the market that we have to penetrate, and we now can penetrate this profitably. So that's one part of it. But the whole pie we see increasing as well, right? As we do that, through our global distribution, we have other opportunities of export that we can use for the products that we build out of here. So I think for a company like ours, it provides a tremendous opportunity from where we are today. We're looking to double our volumes from where we are today over the next 3 to 4 years, but not just the domestic volumes, but also the export volumes. That's why we are investing in capacity. Back in 2020, we found ourselves pretty short and constrained on capacity, and we missed, let's say, an opportunity that was there in the market. We'd never want to be in that position again. And so we are ahead of the curve now, and now we need to bring the volumes for the group and justify those investments.
So as an organization, is CNH India self-sufficient?
We're getting there, I would say. I think one big area is R&D, and I think there were still some areas that we were or still are dependent on some of our other locations for some of the analysis that we do, structural analysis, and some of the competencies that otherwise don't exist here, although we have separated R&D teams that are associated with each plant. I think the tech center coming on board will give us this benefit and will allow us to become much quicker and also build on some of the new innovation areas for the company, right? Okay. And why being exposed to the global, let's say, market and equipment and some of the technology that is already there, that'll help them bring those technologies to India and expose us to that. So I think that's a tremendous benefit that we can get out of here.
From a manpower perspective, this will be my final question. We understand you're looking at about 1,000 people at the ITC by the next couple of years, right? Yeah. 2024.
Yeah.
Overall, for the organization, Raunak, how is that being planned, and what's the kind of resources that you're looking at acquiring in the next 2 to 3 years?
So what you're talking about, the 1,000 people that you're talking about, Dipanshu, are essentially just for the tech center, right? So that's another 700 resources. I think most of them will come within the, let's say, hardcore engineering R&D component. Then there will be the digital part, so that's the hardware and software. So that's, if I were to look at it, that would be about 25% of the resources, and the rest would become in the hardcore engineering side and build on competencies that we will have here. We will also build on tools and capabilities out of here. So I think there are really hardcore engineers that we are looking to build on. Sure. But I think what we have to offer is these engineers that come out and join us will not only be working on technologies that we're using here, but they will be exposed to cutting edge technology that are required in advanced markets such as North America and what's available out there, and be exposed to that, right? But then hopefully we will benefit out of that in the local markets.
Sure. Wonderful talking to you, Raunak, and thank you so much for sparing time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. The pleasure's mine. Thank you, Dipanshu.